For International Women's Day 2022, we are here with Jacqui Patterson, founder and executive director of the Chisholm Legacy Project, a resource hub for Black frontline climate justice leadership. Jacqui, the theme for this year is gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. With that framing in mind, in what ways do you find yourself facing similar circumstances and dynamics around inequities related to sustainability in your work?
Thank you. It's a good question. So many ways. And I started off doing work internationally around gender injustice, and then I was doing work domestically and internationally. And what was interesting was how many similarities there were in terms of everything from the inequities in wealth and income, and just what that leads to in terms of financial security, and therefore how that impacts everything from where one lives, and therefore the extent to which people are exposed to environmental toxins and other hazards, are also how one is able to recover from the disasters if you don't have a financial cushion to, particularly when you're talking about the intersection of race and gender, the fact that Black women, for example, are more often at the head of household for their families, and therefore often the financial conditions where if one is parenting at the same time really causes extreme vulnerability. And so those were some of the things that I found as it relates to wealth. And then also when you tie that in with some other factors, such as if one is financially dependent on a partner, and then there are challenges, whether it's disaster which causes a spike in domestic violence, or as we saw with the BP oil drilling disaster, with the Hurricane Katrina, and then overseas we saw that with everything from the earthquake in Gujarat to the tsunami, and so forth. And then also when there is financial insecurity, we saw in different countries where women are responsible for agricultural production, and so when there are shifts in agricultural yields and women aren't able to conduct what's considered to be their responsibilities, we saw this spike in domestic violence. So these are some of the inequities and some of the impacts of those inequities that I've seen both in working in the United States and working abroad. Also, I'll just add too, in terms of the extent to which women are in decision-making positions. When you look at the US Congress, for example, even though we've come a long way, but the extent to which there are women in leadership in Congress, of course, we've never had a female president of the United States. Often, whether it's governors or mayors, that it's not women, and it's certainly not BIPOC women, Black, Indigenous, people of color women, too often in these roles. And similarly, when I was working in other nations, it was very similar in terms of certainly not presidencies, although you had the rare, whether it's Mary Robinson or Johnson Sirleaf in Liberia, but the fact that we can name the people that lets us know what the incidence is low. And so that also kind of combines to be a challenge, because we don't have women in decision-making positions, and then at the same time, women are closest to the problem and therefore more likely to be able to come up with workable solutions. So these are some of the inequities and the results of those inequities.
Thank you. What kind of changes are you working toward, and how do you see that connected with global women's actions on these issues?
Yeah, so one of the big changes is actually identifying opportunities to ensure that women are able to be in decision-making places, not only in terms of elected office, but also whether it is in decision-making places in organizations and philanthropy or otherwise, but ensuring that women have more in the way of power and more in the way of of control over the design, implementation, and evaluation of solutions. And so that is definitely something that we're working towards at multiple levels. Two is working on actually ensuring that we have ways of examining and measuring these gender differences. So whether it's gender responsive budgeting or other types of gender responsive programming, ensuring that we have ways of looking at programming policies through a gendered lens and ways of addressing the gender differential. So we saw progress in the United States around the wage gap. We are starting to see progress around whether it's the U.S. women's soccer team suing for equal pay to the U.S. men's soccer team. So we're seeing advancements that are happening around wage equity, and so that's certainly critical as well. And also the work that we're doing around ensuring that even as women are in leadership, with the Chisholm Legacy Project, we have a focus on Black femme leadership and ensuring that not just kind of leadership development, but women, femmes, people identified persons who are in leadership, ensuring that they have the resources that they need to be well while they're in leadership. So whether it's coaching, it's residencies, respite retreats, that people have access to that, not something that people have to opt into, especially since we're so used to putting ourselves last, but something that's automatically an institutionalized part of our work and world. And so finally, I will say from a much larger perspective that we are working to shift from an extractive economy to a solidarity economy, because the extractive economy is really at the root of the challenge that we find ourselves in, where there is this notion of there being winners and losers in the economy, and the losers that as defined by the dominant forces have often been gendered people who cut along gendered lines or racial lines or income and so forth. So we're really trying to shift the values of our economy to one that uplifts and affirms the well-being of all. And so we're seeing across the world where there are gender justice activities that are going on, whether it's the leadership of Wangari Maathai or the work that's happening with various gender justice groups around the world, around everything from, as we say, democracy, from wealth building with women. I've been recently meeting with EJ with the Shine campaign, Everjoyce Wynn with the Shine campaign, where she's working on ensuring that women are in leadership around renewable energy. There are women in leadership that are fighting in the Amazon for the well-being of the forests and so forth. So really, we're all kind of rowing in the same direction in terms of trying to push for equality. And it's all under this framework of shifting from an extractive to a living economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today, Jacqui, and thank you for the work that you do.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.